Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the August edition of AFRAA SkyConnect Dialogue. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today my guest is Mr. Randy Heisey. He is the Managing Director, Commercial Marketing at Boeing. And we're going to have very exciting discussions today, focusing mainly on the industry's recovery, sustaining the gains in safety and security on the continent, looking at the Boeing airline forecast, touching on the Boeing's technical support to the industry, particularly in Africa, and looking at aspects of new technology in the aircraft manufacturing area and the environmental subject, what Boeing is doing about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a packed agenda and we have no better person to take us through this session than Mr. Randy Heisey. Mr. Randy Heisey, you're most welcome to SkyConnect.
Mr. Kikuchi, good afternoon, and distinguished guests, greetings. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I look forward to our conversation together.
Thank you very much. Mr. Heisey, before I actually get into the substance of it, could you briefly tell me and our audience who are listening to us, who Randy is and what you do for Boeing, please?
Yes, I'd be delighted to do that. In my role at Boeing, I have the pleasure of leading the team of technical folks who work with the airlines in Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. To work with those airlines in partnering on planning for their future. We have a variety of products and services that we can bring to customers, our airline partners, to help them succeed in their business. And so that's my current role. I have been in this region for going on 2 years now. But I've been with the Boeing company for almost 25 years and started my career in the commercial aviation industry at the pointy end of the airplane as an aviator. So I've had the pleasure to be around the industry for over 30 years, beyond 35 years actually, and have had the pleasure of working with airlines in many parts of the world, but none quite as exciting as this part of the world.
Wow, and 35 years, I'm sure the happenings of the last 2 years have been not something you have seen in your entire 35 years, I guess.
Indeed. What we have been through as an industry is certainly unprecedented. None of us have experienced anything like we have just come through, but once again, the item that is common is the resiliency of this industry. We are seeing signs of things turning around and coming back. And once again, proves that this is a very important part of our life today, the commercial aviation business.
So now, if you look at the impact that COVID and lately the Ukraine-Russia war has had on the commercial side of the business for airlines, it's been crippling. I'm not too sure whether do we see that mirror with the OEMs like Boeing?
Yes, indeed. The impact has been broad and deep across the industry. But again, we are seeing signs of recovery. And I'd like to just take a moment and reflect on another incident that disrupted this industry now over 20 years ago, the terrorism attacks on our commercial aviation business back in 2001. When that happened, there was a lot of concern for safety about commercial aviation, a significant parallel to what we've just been through. And there were many in the traveling public who were afraid to fly. And then also, when they finally returned to flying, they were greeted with a new reality. They needed to remove their shoes. They needed to sometimes take belts off or remove computers. And those are things that are now a common practice for us today and widely accepted. We're seeing parallels for our public traveling today, where they're coming to understand that there are some protocols related to this airborne disease that has come on this globe, and people are adapting and they're returning in large numbers to travel again, feeling safe and dealing with the new inconveniences.
So as these incidents ravage the industry and make and shook the foundations of aviation globally, there has been a lot of interventions from different sectors. I'm not too sure what was Boeing's role or contribution to the industry, particularly the commercial aviation side, knowing that the survival of commercial aviation actually is the survival of Boeing, ultimately.
Indeed, we recognize that our future is closely linked with our airline partners. And because of that, at the outset of the pandemic, Boeing launched something called the Confident Travel Initiative, CTI. And we did that in cooperation with a number of entities, and leading a global effort to provide passengers and crew a safe, healthy, and efficient travel experience. We've been committed to following science and transparency in sharing information to help inform decisions. And again, as we did that, we collaborated with our airline customers, global regulators, industry associations, as well as academic and medical communities, all focused on strengthening air travel safety.
So, like you said, I mean, so much has happened. Now, at the onset, there were issues about the quality of air inside the airplanes. And I remember the OEM had to come out to demonstrate to the traveling public the filtration process that makes air quality inside of the cabin really safe for breathing. And that sort of helped in allaying some of the concerns that the traveling public had at the time. But even today, we still find people at airport terminals walking about, talking to each other without nose mask. But the moment they said, please, we are boarding now, then the crew at the gate says, everybody, please wear your mask. And we've got a mask before we board the planes in some parts of the world. Do you think that this trend is still necessary?
I see another parallel to 2001. One of the barriers to broad return to travel after that security incident, there was a need for harmonization across the industry in the approach to security. Similarly, we have made great progress as a global industry in harmonizing our approach, but in some cases, I still need a PCR test before I take an international flight. In other cases, I only need to show a vaccination record. And in some cases, I don't need to take any action. As you highlight, there are some entities that are still mandating face coverings, where many others are not. As soon as the industry can agree on the correct safety protocols that are harmonized, it will make it much easier for travelers to get about the system and not need to worry about how the requirements change as I move from state to state.
Yeah, and all of this notwithstanding, we have seen the resilience of the air transport industry come to play. We've seen recovery coming at a faster pace than we had actually anticipated. And whilst forecasts say we're going to see recovery to 2019 levels by end of this year, others are saying by 2024. I don't know, what are your thoughts and what does Boeing think? When do we look at a full recovery?
I would like to highlight that, as you said, we are seeing a very strong recovery. Globally, 91% of the 2019 fleet has returned to service because many airlines across the globe parked a lot of their fleet as the demand for travel completely evaporated. The number of flights are back to 82% of the pre-pandemic level, providing capacity in terms of RPKs at about 72% and traffic at about 71%. We are seeing that the domestic markets have led the recovery. In some domestic markets, they're already at or above pre-pandemic levels. And then, of course, there are other domestic markets that are far below, particularly when we look at the Asian markets, where they have had the most stringent approach to dealing with the pandemic. They're far below their pre-pandemic levels of domestic travel. Going forward, we believe that between 2023 and 2024, we'll see the industry back to 2019 levels across the board. And most recently, there's been somewhat of a surprising uptake of international travel, as many states around the globe have relaxed some of their stringency in border crossing procedures and made it easier for travelers to feel comfortable about getting back into the air and traveling internationally.
Yeah, and as international travel pick up speed, we are seeing another problem emerge on the side, and this is skills shortage. And in Europe, during this summer, we are seeing restrictions on capacity on many airlines because the human resource is just not adequate to be able to support the fast bookings that are coming online. Now, how do we deal with this issue of labor shortage, knowing particularly that in the aviation sector, it takes quite a while to actually train and certify people to be able to deliver?
Indeed, there is a long time to get the highly technical members of our operations side fully prepared to operate airplanes from both a maintenance and a flight operations perspective. So yes, it's a big challenge. It's not a challenge that's unique to commercial aviation. The part that's unique is that long spool up time for new employees. But across the globe, there are challenges in workers returning to the workplace following the pandemic. And I'll just highlight that is one part of the reason why the air freight business has been so strong, because it's a challenge that's been facing the surface shipping industry. So much of the surface fleet has not been able to return to service because of the lack of crews to operate those large ships as they try to go in and out of ports. So certainly a global challenge, and a challenge for this industry to develop a talent pipeline and a deep bench to be able to deal with the challenges that, as you highlight, are being exemplified most in Europe right now. Not only within the airplane, but airports similarly have challenges in having staff back to operate a full capacity airport again.
And whilst we're trying to get back to pre-COVID levels of traffic and operations, Boeing came out with the recent 20-year forecast that you normally do every year. And the forecast is very bullish. It's looking at a future with so much prospects ahead of some 43,000 odd aircrafts that are supposed to be ordered and delivered within the next 20 years. I mean, tell us through briefly about the Boeing forecast for the global forecast and in particular the African side.
Sure. Again, what we are seeing is the resiliency of this industry. And while this particular impact on the industry resulting from the pandemic most significantly, but also another impact on our industry that we didn't touch on earlier is the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war, creating other turbulence for the industry. We have over 6 decades of experience in forecasting market requirements. And with that experience and history, we've been able to effectively model variations in traffic growth over time. And so we've got some deep level of experience in forecasting that lead us to what you describe as a bullish forecast that we believe is actually grounded and somewhat dampened because of the situation we've just come through and its impact on the near-term forecast. As a matter of fact, when we get closer and deeper into our modeling, we show a slightly slower growth rate in the first of the 2 decades that this forecast covers. So over the next 20 years, we start with some of the macro drivers of the forecast, and we understand that the world economy, the GDP, will grow at about 2.6%, which will drive passenger traffic growth of 3.8% and cargo traffic growth of over 4%, leading to a growth of jet fleet of about 2.8%. So that means a global airline demand for 41,170 new airplanes through the year 2041, new airplanes, resulting in some growth to the total fleet size, as some of those are replacement airplanes, but some of the fleet remains retained in that period. In terms of distribution of those more than 41,000 new airplanes, approximately 75% will be single-aisle aircraft like the 737. Roughly 20% will be wide-body aircraft, and included in that category are most of the new freighter aircraft that will be delivered over the next 20 years. And then about 5% of the new jet aircraft will be regional jets. I will be talking next month in more detail about the specifics of the Africa forecast, but Africa will need about 1,000 new aircraft in the next 20 years, in line with our forecast from last year, where we saw in that rolling 20-year forecast roughly the same numbers.
What is actually informing the high forecast of single-aisle aircraft? Is it because they're now more robust? Is it because smaller aircraft are becoming more efficient? Or what informs us over 70% of this forecast being single-aisle?
Historically, in the past decade, single-aisle aircraft have been in the majority of the forecast because of their great versatility and capability. It's been about a decade now because it's taken that long for a wide number of airlines to operate the now prior generation aircraft like the 737 next generation, which had the capability to fly medium haul distances with good efficiency. Of course, the newest generation airplanes like the 737 MAX bring even more efficiency and capability, extending the ability to go to modest medium, long range kind of sector lengths. So all of that versatility and capability provides airlines the ability to provide passengers what they are seeking, which is they want to go where they want to go, when they want to go, in the most direct way possible. So that point-to-point service that can be efficiently provided on thinner, closer in markets by a single aisle aircraft leads to great demand for that type of aircraft with those capabilities.
Yeah, the African region is taking very bold policy initiatives to actually improve connectivity, increase traffic and trade across the continent, and make mobility much more easier and cost effective. Was this taken into consideration in your forecast?
Indeed it was. But in order for the forecast to come to fruition, more progress needs to be made on important initiatives like the single air traffic or single African air transport market open skies agreement, which there's been great progress made across the continent, but more work still is yet to be done. And just recently, we've seen more signs with the recent bilateral just announced opening up more frequencies on East Africa between Egypt and I believe it was Tanzania. So good signs, but more work to be done. And yes, we include that as well as some other drivers. We're seeing increasing urbanization across Africa as Africa develops. We're seeing a growing middle class with upward mobility and a working age population that by the end of this forecast will exceed the working class population of India and China. So all of that will lead to higher propensity to travel.
Wow. So before we continue, let me just remind our listeners and participants that you can participate in this discussion. If you have questions or comments, please post them in the Q&A tab or in the chat box, and intermittently I'll visit there and bring up your questions for Randy to respond to you. So please do participate actively and let us know if you have any questions or comments. Randy, now safety and security in Africa has always been of concern in this industry, but we have seen significant progress in the last decade or so, leading to some countries. Kenya last week announced their ICAO audit results, and they are probably the second highest rating on the continent with a score of about 91.9%. I mean, incredibly impressive. Now, as more aircrafts come on stream, as we increase traffic, are we likely to be able to sustain this safety in the African continent, in your view?
Kikuchi-san, or Mr. Kikuchi, the safety and security are foundational to commercial aviation. Basically, without the assurance of these attributes, passengers will not fly. So it needs to continue to receive the kind of emphasis that you've highlighted it has received in Africa just recently. And I would put forth the parallel that an airline trying to operate without airplanes is virtually impossible. Similarly, if the industry, airports, airlines, regulators tried to operate the commercial aviation industry without safety and security, it'll be virtually impossible. So investments in safety and security should be treated like investments in assets, just critical elements of running the business.
Yeah, indeed, very critical to running the business. And now I asked that question because I've noticed that many African airlines have suffered a lot of revenue shortfalls because of the incident of COVID. And now with the Russia-Ukraine war, prices of oil have gone up, so operating cost is off the roof and swept airlines off their feet. So I'm just wondering whether our regulators and the airline operators themselves will be able to continue to focus on their safety and security aspects. But I do hope that and do believe that it is important that they focus on this, so that, because the success of the industry cannot be divorced from the safety of this industry, and it's very critical. Yeah, but from your perspective as Boeing, what has been your support in the area of safety and security to the industry in Africa?
Again, Boeing recognizes that our success is directly linked to the success of our industry partners. And with that in mind, Boeing has initiated the Global Aerospace Safety Initiative. And we're doing that to strengthen the work that our teams had already been doing to improve operational safety throughout the industry. A few of the actions that we're taking under this Global Aerospace Safety Initiative are helping partner with the industry to implement Safety Management System, or SMS, enhancing operational readiness, customer support with our airline partners. We're focusing on competency-based training and evidence-based training rather than some of the legacy methods to training our staff and the airline staff. And we're using insights from operators of our equipment to inform future airplane design so that they can be more safe and robust in challenging environments. In addition to that, we're expanding a program that we call the Flight Operations Representative Program, or FOR. The FOR was adapted from our very successful field service representative model, where we have on-site advisors and partners side by side, co-located with airlines, helping support their operations. These FOR representatives, many of them have airline backgrounds, working as prior line training captains or check airmen or directors of flight operation. And they are available to help review manuals and processes, advise on safety practices, observe in and participate in training and meetings, and also provide a direct line of communication back to Boeing for additional support when that's needed. So we are actively involved with our partners across the continent, and that represents approximately 30 people co-located with our airline partners across the continent, providing on-site support.
Great. Now, Boeing has quite a significant amount of aircraft flying on the continent, and these aircrafts are being supported by the MROs that we have on the African continent. But it would appear that some of these MROs in Africa are grossly underutilized. Their capacity is not used to its fullness. I don't know whether this has been brought to Boeing's attention, and is there something that can be done to ensure that they make maximum use of their idle capacity?
You raise a very good point. There are 5 major airline MROs providing service in Africa, but we're seeing that the demand is in fact greater than the MROs are able to provide, so that many airlines in Africa are sending aircraft to the Middle East MRO facilities. We've got some of our field service representatives on site at each of those African MROs, and they observe that the MROs are highly capable and among the best in terms of their technical capabilities. But we also observe that there's some challenges, and challenges revolve around largely insufficient quantities of spare parts, and lack of equipment readiness to provide the maintenance services. So those are some areas that could be focused on a bit more to help improve the efficiency of those African MROs that have got highly talented staff on board and able to conduct technical service.
Last year, AFRAA and UTD and the MROs in Africa signed a tripartite arrangement to enable UTD, which is an aviation component and space supply in the US, assist in accessing these African MROs to the to the North American, particularly operators, who bring some of their components to these MROs for fixing. Now, that is one way that we're thinking could actually help. One, create the awareness of the presence of these MROs on the continent and their capabilities. And two, also help them to support particularly other parts of the world where capacity might be lacking in the area of maintenance. Now, but the issue that arises is always about the human resource element.
Yes.
We would need a lot more technical human resource in these areas. What do you think we need to do to create, to develop more technical?
That is a challenge that's not unique to Africa, although is a very large challenge in Africa. The global aviation industry needs to continue to keep a sharp focus on engaging in collective efforts to build a robust talent pipeline. Some of the approaches can include more educational outreach, recruiting programs, and creating new pathways into aviation careers. Some of that involves very, very early career learning opportunities, and then other parts are more efficient learning and training. Boeing has been supporting in this area through a lot of our community outreach programs, where over the past roughly decade, we spent over $20 million engaging in communities. A number of those projects have involved supporting training in the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and talent development projects across the continent. So it needs continued focus and focus by a broad-based collaboration of all stakeholders.
Oh, okay. Now, allow me now to go to our questions segment posed by our audience, and I read out a few of them. One is by my good friend Tom Koch. He says, are the FORs the same as the global engagement pilots?
The FORs is a complement to the global engagement pilots. The FOR is a role that is more in a advisory consulting role, whereas you most likely know, since you're familiar with our global engagement pilot program, those are more active in actual hands-on participation in the flight operations, providing training and providing line assist flying and those kinds of activities, where the FOR is more akin to our field service representatives who are full-time in place representatives to facilitate information transfer and participation in meetings and that sort of activity. Again, very qualified prior pilots in many cases, or virtually all cases, but not focused on operating the airplane, but more about the administration, coordinating with the regulatory authorities on flight operations related matters, supporting technical inquiries related to flight operations procedures, and being advisor, consultant, and conduit to the Boeing technical system around flight operations.
Okay. Now, to my technical team, somebody is requesting that you activate the chat box. So please just check, and if it's not activated, please work on it so that they can comment on our discussions. Now, the next question is from an anonymous attendee. The first part of the question, I'm not too sure exactly what it relates to, but he says, what out of the box or exceptional action or project has been initiated by Boeing to support Africa-based airline operations? I'm actually not too sure which aspects of the operations this question is intended, but it's a bit too broad scope. I don't know whether you have any initiatives you want to talk about here.
I would highlight the fact that the FOR program is being initiated in Africa very early in its inception by Boeing under this global safety initiative, intentionally focusing on our partners in Africa. And I would also highlight that just very recently, we held a operators conference in Dar es Salaam, where we had over 100 participants from across the continent gathering together to talk about technical matters, talking about safety, implementing safety practices, addressing issues specific to Boeing fleet types, and just general concerns about flight operations and technical operations of the fleet. So we continue to look for ways to support our partners to ensure that their businesses are not only safe, but efficient and effective so that they can be profitable.
Great. The second question from the same anonymous colleague is, were you able, I think it means Boeing, was Boeing able to bring the used parts supply for Middle East and Africa region? I'm not too sure what that means.
I can share with this individual that Boeing is in used part supply as a part of our parts business. Many years ago, we acquired the Aviation company, which deals in used part inventory, and that is a part of our material offerings for airlines today. So yes, we can help address those issues surrounding used parts across the globe and in Africa, Middle East as well.
Yeah, and he further asks, we had observed that units are available. I think units of the used parts are available to MROs, but not to airlines. Will the priority of listing be changed to equal for airlines, MROs, and distributors with the same price, as all three are working for making the aircraft flying?
I have to confess, I am not a specialist in the parts business, so I don't know about our policies, but I encourage this anonymous individual who seems to have a fair amount of awareness to bring that issue forward to our Boeing Global Services team and allow them the opportunity to address it. If after that, they don't get a satisfactory resolution to the question, I welcome them to reach out to me, and perhaps some of the staff there can provide some indirect contact. We don't necessarily need to broadcast all of my contact details, but I welcome outreach through our communications team.
Great, thank you very much. So let's go back to our discussions. And I hope that more questions and comments will be coming from our audience, and we take that just before we wrap up this session. But moving on, I just want us to touch briefly on new technology and environmental sustainability. You know, the environment has become a topical issue, and even though aviation contribution to global emissions is quite small, proportionate to other industries.
Yes.
Industry is focused on doing something about it. And as an aircraft manufacturer, we just want to know, what is Boeing doing to support this global effort in ensuring that we mitigate or minimize the emissions in the aviation industry?
Rafael, this is a topic that is at the forefront, as you've highlighted, across the global industry, and particularly getting emphasis from our colleagues in the Europe area, where understandably they have a lot of concern about environmental health. With that emphasis, and as a part of what Boeing has continued to do throughout time, we are focusing on innovating across the entire spectrum of sustainability. We've been investing quite heavily, both in what is achievable today and looking out on the horizon to what might be possible in the future. And with the increased emphasis just recently, we've been partnering even more so with our airline customers, governments around the globe, and academia, all aimed at this bold climate change ambition with a commitment to achieve net zero for our industry by 2050. That again is a sort of an audacious, robust goal. But at Boeing, we believe it's entirely achievable, as we have taken an approach that's grounded in data, scientific research, collaboration, and testing. It's going to require multiple phases to get to that goal of net zero carbon emissions. But we believe it's a everything for zero approach rather than a singular pathway to get to net zero. So that everything includes fleet renewal, operational efficiency, renewable energy sources, and then advanced technology, as you highlight. So on fleet renewal, that's where a part of technology comes into play. On the virtual backdrop behind me, you can see some of our latest technology that is currently being tested on the 777X. That high efficiency wing will provide significant reduction in fuel consumption and therefore carbon emissions. Over the past decade, we've invested more than $60 billion in research on lots of technologies like the digital thread, improvements in carbon composite materials, advanced high bypass engine design, and improvements in aerodynamics, such as something we call natural laminar flow that reduces drag and improves the overall environmental efficiency. And some of those examples are today being utilized on our 737 MAX family. For example, that family produces 20% less emissions than the prior generation and has a noise footprint 50% less than the airplanes it replaces. In terms of operational efficiency, we're bringing technology to help provide efficiency that can reduce emissions by about 10%, such as GPS-based navigation systems. And we invest in the technologies that support sustainable aviation fuel, which is a big part of getting to the future. And then in terms of new aircraft technology, we believe that the future of flight will incorporate the latest digital design, test, and production technologies, airframe propulsion and system technologies, as well as new energy solutions. One area that demonstrates that innovation, we partnered with in a joint venture with Whisk Aero. And together, we have flown over 1,600 successful flights of a battery electric air taxi, working on the 6th generation vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And it is looking like the candidate for certification of the first autonomous, all-electric passenger carrying airplane in the United States. So we are doing lots of activity in this realm around advancing technology and reducing the impact on our environment.
Well, it would appear that the aircraft will be flying in the next years and going forward might be significantly different from what we're flying in today.
You know, that is possible, but on the other hand, maybe not in our lifetime. We wouldn't have predicted that we're using smartphones that enable us to connect to others around the globe the way we are able to do today if we just looked back 30 years ago. So perhaps within our lifetime, we will see that very transformed air transport system, but more likely we will see evolutionary technology rather than revolutionary technology coming in the near future. One of our objectives is to assure that 100% of the Boeing aircraft produced by 2030 will be capable of flying on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. So that's the kind of step that we can take now. And then over time, some other concepts like something called the transonic truss-based wing, a project that we're working on with NASA, will bring some very different looking airplanes perhaps in the future as more and more technologies are introduced. So it's going to be a blend of approaches.
Interesting, yeah. And I think combining the technology with the operational efficiencies that the industry is looking at, the operating side is looking at, would actually combine to bring us the results that we're all looking at in terms of impact on the environment. And now I have another question. As a young fellow who is listening to us wants to know, what are the initiatives that Boeing is going to launch to train the youth, to give them the required skills to cope up with the booming air traffic demand? Has Boeing got any training programs for the youth?
We have multiple approaches. As I mentioned, we are involved on the African continent, partnering with a number of existing efforts to develop youth. But even within my team that works with airlines across the African continent and in other parts of nearby regions, we support another level of youth. This summer, I am pleased to have as a college intern working with my team who is from Rwanda, but studying her university school in the US. And so we have many ways that we reach out and work to develop talent through our presence on the continent of Africa and through some programs for folks who choose to come to the United States.
Oh, okay. That's great stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, when we were discussing about the Boeing commercial market outlook, our technical team posted a link. So if you want to know more about the Boeing forecast of this industry in the next 20 years, please just check out the link and download it, and you would find a lot of very useful information on the Boeing website. Please make an effort to visit there for more information, and we'll keep you in touch as we go along.
And if I may add, Raphael,
yes,
at that link, there are many types of information, but there is an interactive section where more details can be found about the various regions of the world, including Africa. So ahead of my briefing next month, those who are very curious can go have a look through that interactive section and get a preview of what we'll be talking about next month on the African specific outlook for the next 20 years.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much for that addition. Now, another question says, what are the initiatives that Boeing is going to launch to train the youth? Oh, sorry, that is about the same question. Sorry about that. No problem. Before we wind up, I cannot let you go without actually finding out from you what we should be expecting from the upcoming AFRAA Boeing Airlines seminar scheduled for 15th and 16th September. What should we be looking for at this event next month? Sure.
Well, first of all, I would like to highlight that we highly value the partnership that we have with AFRAA, as well as the airlines across the continent. So it's our honor to co-host this event with AFRAA. And at that airline planning workshop, it's an event designed to give African airline personnel insights into some experiential learning, where there will be a focus on the dynamics and business decision drivers that influence the airline business. We'll bring our global perspective from the Boeing team and provide the opportunity for interaction among airlines from across the continent and some network opportunity, where we will focus on topics such as fleet management, revenue planning, network and schedule planning, airline economics, operations or strategy. So it's an opportunity to spend time together in a learning environment, networking with peers and airlines across the continent, as well as to hear from some of our subject matter experts on these topics related to airline business.
And this is absolutely free.
Completely free of charge. We will provide the meals. Participants coming will need to take care of their own lodging arrangements, but there is no fee for the course nor the materials, and we will provide the food and beverage during the event as well.
Great. Thank you so much for this. And I would want to encourage as many of our participants here who have not attended this program to do well to attend. I have personally attended this event on 3 different occasions, and each time it's a new experience and an enriching one at that. If you want a career in the aviation industry, you cannot miss out on the airline seminar by Boeing. So please take advantage. Our technical team will launch a link through which you can actually register to attend this program. Now, finally, before I let you go, I would just want to give you an opportunity, Mr. Randy, to give us your final thoughts. Any key messages you have for the African aviation industry and its stakeholders?
I have a thought, Raphael, and I think it builds on something that you've heard me talking about through our dialogue here. Collaboration, partnership are absolutely key to progress. Africa is a large continent with huge potential. So leaders in this industry and stakeholders across the continent need to work to continue to create a vision that is every bit as big as the continent of Africa is big. There's great potential, not only for African airlines to increase the share of traffic carried to and from the continent, but also there's significant opportunity to increase the traffic and commerce within the continent. And that can be realized by continuing to focus on improving connectivity, opening the skies and borders, And all of that will stimulate new opportunities and enhance the prosperity for both the commercial aviation business and the economies of the countries in Africa. Boeing stands ready to partner with the industry to ensure safety and efficiency in the operations and growing a sustainable aviation market in Africa, because our success is linked to the success of our partners in Africa.
Wow, well said. Your success as Boeing is linked to the success of Africa and African aviation. I'm very grateful for that. But I guess so. Somebody just posted a question that which is actually a very exciting one. I would just want to see if Boeing is working on that. This is Sharif Sise. He says, "Is Boeing working on a next twin wide-body engine aircraft to take on A350?"
The A350 was a response to our outstanding 787 Dreamliner, which we now have 4 sizes, and we are returning to delivering that airplane again. I'm sure many are aware that we had to pause for a bit while we worked with our regulator in the United States to assure that the airplane was meeting all of the very discrete design criteria that were first established for the airplane. But we already have the airplane that competes with the A350 on the segment that most of the industry is focused on. The A350 is also attempting to reach up into a larger segment. And for that, we are bringing the new 777X in to replace the segment of the market that previously had only been served by 4-engine airplanes like the 747 and the A380. But now we're bringing that twin engine efficiency on the 777X, which will provide the high capacity, long range capability with the sustainability attributes that are needed to achieve this net zero goal by 2050.
Wow. Thank you very much. On that laudable note, I would want to thank you very much, Randal Heisey, for taking time to enlighten our audience and provide us with good information on what this industry is going through, and also giving us some positive outlook. It's not all doom and gloom, but there's a silver lining at the end of the day, and we should be working very hard towards accomplishing that. And particularly for the African aviation sector, we need to put our house in order by ensuring we take away all the regulatory bottlenecks to ensure that connectivity is available and accessible by the airlines, and we need to invest in this industry significantly to take advantage of the growing traffic. Thank you very much for your time, and to our guests who are listening to us, I would want to thank all of you for sticking to us, and thank you very much for your contributions and questions. I wish you all a very nice day and best of luck. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you as well. It's been my privilege, and thank you to AFRAA for providing this forum.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Randal. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.